This is the I Read Comic Books podcast, the very best podcast for regular comic book fans. I'm your host, Mike Rapin, and joining me this week, two groundhogs looking for their shadow. This week, I am joined by, from the Next Issue podcast, our good pal, Danny.
Hello, everyone.
And from the Comics That We Love podcast, Zach McCrary.
Ahoy, hoy.
Thank you both for joining me this week. I'm super excited because I don't know if you guys knew this, but we have a zine that's coming very soon, launching it in March. I'm putting out the rough deadline right here. So far, I'm just going to say we've got some incredible pieces of art that are coming as part of this. I've shared some previews with the folks on the show. I'm super excited, and I can't stop thinking about this when I'm not trying to read comics and catch up on various things in my life and deal with everything else that's going on in the world. And there's quite a bit going on in the world right now to think about and feel crazy about. I'm working on the zine, and it's coming together superbly. This week, I'm doing a lot of work to basically get the word out. So if you haven't already, gotten notified, or click the button on Kickstarter, there's a link in the show notes. Go to ircb.fyi/zine, and you can check out the Kickstarter preview that we have. It's going to be incredible. So got to get that out of the way. Everyone, you should know about this at this point. It's going to be really, really exciting. But we are here to do the thing. We're back to basics. We're here to talk about comic books. And so I have two legally mandated questions that I have to ask both of you, which is, how have you been? How have comic books been? Let's start with, let's start with Zach. Or Danny. Excuse me, Danny. Jeez.
Well, Mike, before I answer your questions, I want to ask you if there's any announcements that we need to go over for the show.
Anything
outside, Danny, you are on top of things today. I'm all out of sorts. Yes, you are totally right. We do have two announcements that I meant to go through. One is we have a survey winner. So everybody out there in the world who took the IRCB listener survey, we really appreciate you and all of your time for filling things out. Let us know how we're doing. And we do have a winner. I forgot to announce it on the annual episode, so thank you, Danny, for reminding me. I want to shout out our good friend Shane, aka Avocado Kenobi, is our winner. I'll be sending you an email very shortly about what you want to do, whether you get a gift card to Amazon or Midtown Comics, your local comic book shop, donation to a nonprofit of your choice, whatever. We'll get it all sorted out. But look for an email from me very, very soon, probably later today after we finish recording. And on top of that, I want to shout out Bruto Caterino. Their Kickstarter Bereavement is out right now. If you're interested in backing a Kickstarter, which you should be because Kickstarters are incredible. As I said, we have a Kickstarter coming for the show, but I'm a huge proponent of Kickstarters, and Bruno reached out, asked if we could give them a shout, and I absolutely would. I got a preview of this book. It's a pretty good comic book. I'll say that. I've read a little bit of it, and it's pretty good. So if you're into comics, maybe you should check this out. That's the blanket statement I'll put on it. But thank you, Danny, for reminding me. Now tell me, how have you been? How have comic books been?
Well, Mike, I've been doing okay. There's been a bug going around all over the place, so kind of recovering from that. But it's been a good week overall. When it comes to comic books, I won't comment on the rest of the world. But comics, though, man, oh man. I'm going to talk about a collection that I've been meaning to read for a little while. This is by Zach Thompson, and I think you're probably both very familiar with Zach, especially if you like the Skinwalker Ranch comic that they adapted from the book or the podcast or whatever that was. So there was another book that he did called Blow Away. This is from Boom Studios, and I read the collection, which contains issues 1 through 5. I read issue 1 when it originally came out just to do a review for the channel. And I was like, oh, this is interesting. I like it. But this is probably something that I'm just going to read all at once, especially when I see that it's a miniseries. Like, I'm just going to knock it out all at once. It makes things a lot easier for myself, for the story, and for me not to have to keep track of everything month to month. This is, like I said, written by Zach Thompson with art by Nicola Izo. Colors by Francisco Segala, letters by D.C. Hopkins. In this book, we follow tenacious wildlife videographer Brienne Brodigan, who witnesses something she's both unsure of, but she also can't unsee. Was it a murder? Or is her mind playing tricks in the midst of frozen isolation? Worst of all, the secrets have an easy time hiding in the snow after witnessing a violent argument between two hikers on a remote island. Brienne has to be sure that the footage on her camera will tell the truth soon enough. So to me, this felt like let's update that Rear Window story, right?
Mm-hmm.
How do we do that? Well, let's put it in like this frozen Arctic tundra. It's a videographer who's that's the really funny part that it's like this videographer is trying to capture these birds because they're doing a show. I guess it's a rare bird that they're finally gonna have offspring and coming back from extinction. Uh, and I was like, oh, that's cool. Like we're just gonna get into this whole nature of things. But then the book shifts to like, no, 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 this is actually a murder mystery, which I was not expecting. I was like, this is some kind of weird nature preserve thing, but yeah, it's a fun way to update that story. Where like, how do we get our main character to have trouble trying to figure out like what's really going on? Well, we put him in the Arctic in a snowstorm, so like it's all the the harsh weather, the isolation. It all brings those stories. Also, technology plays a factor in it because cameras freeze and they tip over, and so
Mm-hmm.
it's an
Mm-hmm.
interesting premise. Um, I think overall I enjoyed the book. It did feel a little rushed when it came to the pacing, especially like when I was getting towards the last issue. I was like, how are we gonna wrap up everything that I think has been set up in the rest of these 20 pages? And I think overall, Thompson and the team kind of land the plane. Maybe in not maybe not in the most clean way possible, but overall, I think the story works. It's a story that has a lot of twists and turns, and having
Mm-hmm.
seen something like True Detective Night Country, which is also takes place like in this isolated town in Alaska, like they face a lot of the same challenges. So I was like, there's a out there people out there looking for stories like these. The art itself is very stylized, which I think feels like the way they approach this is from a very specific point of view. You're seeing everything from Brienne's point of view, so maybe she
Mm-hmm.
has this whole, especially because you're looking at it through different cameras and in the computer, and she's combing through the footage. So I think the stylization of the characters kind of make it blend, like it all blurs into one thing, and she's having a hard time trying to figure out what's real, what stuff that she's seeing on the camera, what stuff that maybe the cameras are messed up, and then of course having to like eventually get your hands down and dirty and actually go into the town and try to figure things out. So um, I liked it. It keeps you in a constant state of having to like try to guess what's going on. So if you're looking for a little murder mystery, I think Blow Away is something that you might want to check out from Boom Studios because I had a good time. I knew I was going to enjoy it, and like I said, it's not the best book, but it's definitely something that was I was very entertained by.
Yeah, this I just looking at some of the preview art, man. Izzo's art, Izo, incredible, like beautiful looking book. There's like a preview that they show on the Boom page of them like combing through photos and
Yeah,
stuff. I really, really like the panel like set up for that. Um, yeah, this looks cool. I mean, I this is one of those books where I'm like, I would pick this up at the library and then probably be very surprised at like how cool of a book it is overall. So I appreciate you bringing this to my attention. I was not aware of this book at all. I feel like I try to tap into stuff that Zach Thompson is
yeah,
working on, but I had never heard of this
yeah.
book.
I need to go back and catch up on the Into the Unbeing book because I only read the first one for that
Oh
one
my
too,
god.
and I know there's a new one coming. And Hayden Sherman's art is like just stuff out of my nightmares. So I'm ready.
Yeah.
I'm ready to go back. I'm ready to go back to that world too.
Hell yeah. Hell yeah. Well, Zach, what about you? What's how have you been? How have comic books been? What's going on?
Man, life's been great. Can't complain. And comics have also been great. I'm just wrapping up in January every year for my show. I do the New Year's comic spree where I try to at least take like a small chunk out of the giant stack of books that I have that I didn't
Mm-hmm.
get to over the year. And one of them that I hit was issue number 1 of One for Sorrow from DSTLRY, written by and drawn by and colored by Jamie McKelvey, also colored by Courtney Vokey, and letters by Ariana Marr. I gotta tell you, and I had this realization recording this past week's episode that I'm a DSTLRY guy now. Like
Oh
I
shit.
don't know when it happened, but it did because like everything that I have read coming out of that company, I have loved. I've loved the art, I've loved the stories, like everything that they are doing for me anyway is gangbusters. But if I had to pick one number one issue from DSTLRY for people to read, it's One for Sorrow. I'm gonna put it as my number one Distillery comic, period.
Hmm.
It was just something about it really hit for me. So this book, it takes place in early 1900s London, England, and there's a bunch of separate narratives happening all at once. Like there's one where there's this woman, she's working at a bar, and clearly this bar is doing some underhanded things. It's like got a criminal element. You know, the owner clearly is involved in that kind of stuff, and she seems to be trying to worm her way into that. We don't know why, but we watch her as she tries to do so. And we've also got this wealthy socialite who is talking to a medium and is trying to meet an ancient ancestor and talk to them. And this medium's like this really creepy woman, and like she's a widow. Like that's like her gimmick, is that she's a widow and she wears like a black bridal veil and stuff like that, and we get to see that whole thing go down. But there's also this serial killer going around called the Magpie, who's got a really cool design with like a bird skull mask and a black hood, and we see this Magpie kill like one or two people, and it's clear that this person is on a mission for something. We don't know what. You know, it's all questions. It's issue number one. There's also a detective who, like, he's like this famous Sherlock Holmes-esque detective who's kind of retired but is like looking for someone, and we don't know who. So we got all these different red strings, you know, and we don't know what's going on, what's going to connect all these things, but they're all really good. Each of these little narratives by themselves are interesting and have something to them, and the art is gorgeous. I love Jamie McKelvey's art. It's a beautiful book. So much attention paid to the period piece of it all, like all of the backgrounds and the dress and everything. It was all perfect. It really pulls you in. This whole story really pulled me in, and by the end of issue number one, you finally get to see that cork board where all the red strings are coming from. And it's like, oh, okay, I'm here for this. You know, like now I'm in for the ride. So if you're out there and you haven't heard of this book, go check out One for Sorrow. Like I am all about this story right now.
Interesting. Yeah, I this book had me very interested. I feel like I've read a smattering of Distillery books at this point. Like shout out our pal Chip over there, who's given me a little bit of preview on things. But I, you've hooked me. You've got me peaked. My interest has been peaked because I've read some books. Some of them worked for me, some of them didn't. But I mean, I've just was skimming through the first issue a little bit, and it looks pretty freaking good. I mean, Jamie McKelvey's art is very hard to resist.
Right?
I mean, I think that is enough to get me at least to maybe pick up a Distillery book. I don't know. I run into the problem always of like, where the fuck do I put this book? But that's a whole other conversation.
We've had that conversation a few times. Like,
yeah. But
how do you deal with Distillery size comics?
I know.
One thing I've like seen a little bit, especially because I review some of the Distillery books, and the thing that people keep coming to in the comments sometimes is like, yeah, this looks really good, but like, how do I justify paying $9 for a book? That's really the biggest barrier of entry. Especially when a lot of these are just like 3 issue, you know, they're big issues, but they're 3 issues. So like the collection's going to be probably like a $30 book or whatever. So like, why would I not just wait for the collection? Especially because the collections look so good.
Yeah.
They are. I got the Somna book. I got the Gone book from Jacques. I'm definitely getting that new Scott Snyder book. I mean, I bought that first single, but
that was really good too.
And I'm sure this one's gonna be great. So that's kind of like what I've seen from people, and then just myself too. Like, I can't have all the random one shots or these random gigantic books. I don't have anywhere to put you.
I think that is a valid way to approach these books, unfortunately, right? Like, I think the Distillery hardcovers are usually $30 to $35, which like is it cheaper to just buy singles? Probably, but that's kind of the same for some image books. But nonetheless, like, it's all about like what your preferred focus on for these books is. Like, do you want to be able to read them all in one go? Do you want to be able to, you know, have a nice book that you can just put on a bookshelf? Because I personally think a hardcover is, or even a soft cover of this size, is better to put on a bookshelf than the individual like single magazines. You know, that's what I'm doing with, I talked about this before. It's what I do with a lot of my Black Label books because I don't have anywhere else to put them. And I always feel bad because they fall over and they get all beat up and stuff.
Yeah.
So this may be the trade weight type of book. I mean, it's very hard to resist Jamie McKelvey's art. I genuinely feel that. So anything that he's drawing, I'm really going to give an extra chance. But I think to your point, Danny, it might just be better to wait for the collection on this. If only because I think at this point we know Distillery is not going to like stop any of these books, right? They're not going to cancel them mid publish or print. Plus, like, I don't know what the timeline is on this book. Like, when's issue 2 even going to drop? When's issue 3 going to drop? Are we waiting like end of this year to even get the 3rd issue and then the hardcover comes later? I don't know. But the fact that, Zach, you're saying that this is your number 1 Distillery book, and I believe, if I'm not mistaken, you read quite a few Distillery books to make that episode that you just put out.
I did. Yeah.
That's a pretty high praise, I think, overall. Because I think a lot of Distillery number 1s especially are pretty darn good. Like, I've read a smattering of them and I've been like, wow, this is intriguing. Now the follow-up maybe hasn't worked for me, but still, I'm still hooked. I'm still giving Jamie McKelvey a chance. I want to give Jamie McKelvey a chance. So this may be a trade weight then for a lot of us, it sounds like.
And this one for me is like, for me, it was a perfect storm. And it's probably because it is a single person who is doing their entire vision themselves. Sure. And so they know exactly how they wanted everything. And for me, what McKelvey is doing just works on all levels.
Sick.
And I know Image doesn't normally do the $10 trades anymore, but they did it for the Power Fantasy. So, like, if I'm going to recommend a book to you that you got to spend $10 on, like, read the Power Fantasy. That's 5 issues of like the whole first volume, right? So
yeah, it is a weird world that we live in where a single issue of a Distillery comic is $9 and a full 6-issue trade of the Power Fantasy, or maybe 5 issues, 5 or 6, I can't, is $10. That is bonkers, but like the economics of comics will forever be unknown to me, right? Still. That's interesting. Well, Zach, I appreciate you bringing this up because I completely forgot that this book was coming out, and I'm glad to know that it is out because I remember it was announced. I just didn't know the release date was. So I might have to check this one out just to see it. Just maybe I'll put my hands on it at a comic shop if they still have any copies. But that's again, totally other discussion. Maybe we'll save it for the post credits because I have a lot more thoughts. But I do want to talk about some comics that I read. So yeah, I think like everyone has said, it's been a very interesting couple of weeks since we last recorded an episode of this show. But I've been trying to just keep myself focused on the things that I can control in my world and my community, which involves, me getting a bunch of people together yesterday to go out and do a Pokemon Go event, which is very, very exciting. We did this big Gigantamax Kinkler event. I managed to get 12 people total to come out to that, which is crazy, which happened to be enough people for us to actually do this thing. And if you're not plugged into the world of Pokemon Go, maybe none of this matters or even makes any sense to you. But there's this thing that they do in Pokemon Go where you have to get actually physical people together to do these things. And that can always be a struggle because who wants to go out of their house, especially in the middle of winter? But the plus side was I feel like I did enough organizing on my end to actually get some people out. People were excited, very excited to see other people came out, right? It was this like build up on top of itself event where like people saw that we were together, so more people came together. It was very, very cool. So glad that we got that done. Funny enough, after we finish recording, I'm going to go do more of that. But because I can't stop. But
I love the idea of like I'm putting together a posse to go hunt these Pokemon down.
Hey, dude, we had 12 people walking up and down the main street of my little town. It was very, very fun. I'm very I don't know. It's very exciting for me because like we have a really awesome community online of people here on the Discord, and I really love that. And the fact that I feel like I've also been able to find that in like my local town is like very just heartwarming in the sense of like, I don't know. The internet, I feel like over the last 5 years has personally made me feel very lonely in a lot of ways, where as much as I interact with people online, there is a little bit of a different thing when you interact with people in real life. And so to have both communities available to me, like in terms of just like when I want to be social is so great just in general. And I feel very lucky to have found both of those communities. So that's a whole other thing. Nonetheless, my Pokemon Go dedication has not wavered. I'll just say that for anyone out there wondering. For those doubters out there, those haters out there, it has not stopped.
Much respect.
But anyways, yeah. But anyways, I did read some comics. I've been weirdly trucking through a lot of my Kickstarter books, if only because they're like super readily available. I found a workflow to get comics from Kickstarter or wherever. We had like a big conversation on the Discord the other day about how you manage all of your various digital downloads for all the Kickstarter and indie comics that you buy. I found like a decent workflow to get things out together. And so I sat down and I read this book that just came in called Crimson Fall, The Shore Tower. I also read the little mini comic that came along with it called Crimson Fall, Lambs of God. So I kind of want to talk about both because they're basically like a continuation of each other's stories. This is by a guy named Derek Laufman. I cannot for the life of me remember if somebody recommended this book to me or if I just saw it on Blue Sky, because that's where I've been seeing a lot of Kickstarter stuff. But I was blown away by just the cover image of this Kickstarter. And the story follows this guy named Sir Duncross. He's a former knight turned monster hunter as he pairs up with this old priest named Father McKellen to essentially hunt down demons and monsters. The reason why, well, like Sir Duncross has basically seen all that the world has to offer in terms of evil and has this chip on his shoulder to essentially destroy this evil. And he teams up with this Father McKellen in the first story called Crimson Fall, Lambs of God, where Sir Duncross is investigating an old like monastery that has been taken over by demons. Yeah, there we go. Paul, I think Paul's the person that recommended this to me. Thank you, Paul. The story follows them, and then there's the big story that came out as part of the Kickstarter, which is the Stone Tower, is about another adventure that these two go on. I feel like my explanation here is not even a good one because the comics are so like simple and perfect. They like there's no overarching lore, there's no humongous world building. Like Laufman takes the medieval world that we kind of all know and love from various fantasy stories and then plays within its bounds by leaning on fantasy bits and bobs that I think any reader, whether you're familiar with this stuff or not, can kind of understand. Like it's a guy in armor with a sword. It's like a priestly type character. There isn't a lot of magic in the story that we are aware of, at least, right? There's only like demons that show up and monsters that kind of exist in the world, but like there isn't really like a magic to the world that we've seen so far. And yeah, that's the thing that I really like about it overall is that there's nothing complicated about this book, which allows Laufman to like flex page after page with like quick but steady pacing. The action and the dialogue are super like they're super well done. They're kind of rough. Like these guys that take no bullshit, especially Sir Duncross. He takes no bullshit. Father McKellen is kind of like he's conscious of like maybe you don't use language like that, or maybe you could have been nicer, you know. So they're a really really nice pair. It's a really nice buddy action story. And really, I love how just rough and tumble the entire book is. Like it's trying to just you got to just deal with the story that's coming at you. And I hate to compare it to anything because I truly think that if you pick this book up, you would love it for what it is by itself. But I really have to say that if you want to compare it to anything, I would put it in the similar vein of like a Hellboy or The Witcher. If you like those types of stories, you will feel right at home with this book. Hellboy, The Witcher have their own set of lore and bigger things. There's a lot of magic and demonology and whatever in those books, but you feel that same vibe in the Crimson Fall, both of the stories. And yeah, I don't know. I feel like a lot of other comics have tried to nail this type of feeling. There are numerous out there. Nobody else has come close, in my opinion, like Derek Laufman has. So if you want more of that type of story that just feels like I'm going to just fall into a world, Laufman delivers that to you in the 56-page The Shore Tower and like the 24-page Lambs of God. Like these are the only two comics that exist in this world. And I am like clamoring for the next one, even though I know this one just came out. I literally just got it delivered to me this past week. But yeah, he uses every page in The Shore Tower and Lambs of God to like envelop you within this world. Like honestly, this guy, he has such a beautiful art style that is not like super complex. It's not super detailed, but it's all encompassing. No page feels unloved. Every single inch of every single page is used to its maximum in order to keep you focused in the action and the story and the world that the story takes place in. I don't know. I'm so impressed by this book that again, thank you to Paul for shouting this out in the Substacks and Kickstarters channel in our Discord, because it's because of conversation in the community that we have that I'm able to find books like this and go, I'm a diehard now. I love this book from start to finish and I cannot wait to read more. So yeah, I'm eagerly awaiting the next volume. Crimson Fall. You can read the first story, Crimson Fall, Lambs of God, on Derek Laufman's website. I'll post a link to that in the show notes, but go buy this book. It's worth it. It's like beautiful. It's very well put together, high quality stuff. And I think, again, if you're into Hellboy or The Witcher or anything like that, you will absolutely love this series. So highly recommended. Highly recommended.
I was looking at some of the art online, and I really like what you said there. It's a phrase that I think I'm going to have to remember to describe art, because it's really hard for me to describe art because I am not an artist. But
Sure.
the idea of no page feels unloved is completely accurate from what I'm seeing from this art. Like, you're right. It's not like hyper detailed and hyper realistic, but it does have like it does. It feels very loved. Like there was attention paid to all of this, and it is really well put together. And I like the color palette a lot for this book, and that really is reminiscent to me anyway of a Hellboy. I see where you're coming from. That
So
it looks gorgeous.
To be just a little bit clear, so like the Crimson Fall Lambs of God is a black and white comic, right?
Oh, that one's black and white.
Crimson Fall, The Shore Tower, is all in color. It's really, really interesting book overall, like to go from one to the next. But like, man, you can tell like Laufman like just truly, truly gets comics. I really need to dig into his other work. And yeah, Paul just pointed out Lambs of God, feels like so much story. Then you look and you go, oh my God, it's only 24 pages. Like it's such a dense comic without feeling overwhelming. Like, again, this dude has a mastery of comics that like is very rare. And again, I really need to check out his other stuff, because this feels like him at his peak. He's peaked with this type of book. I cannot wait for more of it. It's so good.
Well, I mean, yeah, I'm looking at the Kickstarter too. I love the character designs. They just look really cool and fun. Like, he's like gruff, but he's also like kind of adorable in some kind of ways. So I like that a lot. Yeah.
I've got my physical copy here that I'm showing for those of you on Patreon who are watching the video, and it's just a gorgeous book. I don't know, man. I don't know. It feels like it's got the style almost like a YA book, but it has all of the action and tropes and stuff that you would expect out of like an adult fantasy series. I mean, I just cannot express how amazing this freaking book is. But we have to move on. Otherwise, I'm going to sit here and I'm going to keep being a shill for this guy who I've never talked to or have no clue about other than his Kickstarter. So let's talk about comic books that are on the top of our pile, comics that are new or old or just something you're trying to get off of your shelf. I want to shout out the folks on Discord today who let us know what they're reading next. Avocado Kenobi is going to be reading Black Hammer Omnibus Volume 1. Hell yeah, that's all I can say to that. Paul's going to be reading In Perpetuity by Maria and Peter Hoey. Elle is going to be reading Brooms by Jasmine Walls and Tio Duval. And Nick is reading Frankenstein, New World, The Sea of Forever #1. I'm guessing that's in the Hellboy / Dark Horse Mignola I think universe, right?
It's a follow-up to the previous Frankenstein book with all the weird colors.
Right.
And yeah, those are interesting. I say that every time, and then I never read them. But I know Nick is reading them, so as long as somebody's enjoying it.
Yeah. Someone's got to be reading all those Hellboy verse-ish books or Mignola verse books, right? Well, yeah. Let me kick things back over to you, Zach. What is on the top of your pile this week?
This one's pretty exciting to me because it's something that I've been wanting to check out for a while now, and that is Usagi Yojimbo, the Fantagraphics stuff. We're going old school. We're starting from the beginning. Obviously, written and drawn by Stan Sakai. And I do have to give you a lot of credit for this, Mike, because you talking about Yojimbo on I Read Comic Books was the thing that really spurred me on to be like, oh, I didn't know that these were so good. Like, people are talking these up. Because for me, honestly, for a long time, and I'm sure I'm not alone, I just figured Yojimbo was another side character from the Ninja Turtles.
Oh man, Stan, we are so sorry. Stan, if you're listening, we're so sorry.
It's the first time I ever saw Yojimbo was on the Ninja Turtles cartoon. I had the action figure. I thought the character was awesome, but I figured he was a one-off. I don't know. Are there any others that did that? Is Panda Khan also like from another comic book that I should check out? I want to know now. But yeah, so I always assumed that this was a Ninja Turtles character until probably my 20s. And then I was like, oh, wait, there's this is its own thing. Like there was a crossover,
Mm-hmm.
but this is its own thing. And then people like you and from other shows like comic book couples counseling, like I've
Yeah, yeah,
talked
yeah.
about Yojimbo and just talked up how great these stories are and how masterful a creator Stan Sakai is. And because of that, it really made me want to read them, because it's this kind of book is very much in my wheelhouse. And so I'm excited to start reading this. And if I could plug myself a little bit, eventually you and me, Mike, we're going to be talking about it on the Comics That We Love, of course. So this is
It's
homework.
coming.
It's homework, but it's like, that's the best part about doing a show about comics, is your homework is comics.
Yeah, yeah,
So
yeah.
yeah, I'm super excited to start reading this. If you've never heard of Usagi Yojimbo, he's a samurai rabbit, and I really don't know anything about his stories. All I've heard is that they are absolutely amazing, and so I'm excited.
Yeah, dude. I here's the thing. When I started getting into this, I had heard about this character for and I'm a recent Usagi Yojimbo person, right? Like I'm not like a long time reader. I think I had seen some of the crossover with TMNT, but I'm like TMNT crosses over with like a lot of stuff, so I was like, there, whatever. But I knew it was just this rabbit wielding character, and a lot of people really loved the character, but I knew nothing about those comics, and so like I think I got volume 1. They're back behind me on the bookshelf here, from Fantagraphics, when they did a recent reprint of like the first 7 volumes. And I was floored because, I'm sure folks on the show have heard this before, but like, Sakai just wanted to do a comic and clearly has this unbelievable mastery of like telling a slow story that feels really high action. And I don't know, the way he does action is absolutely incredible. Clearly inspired by Japanese director Akira Kurosawa. So like, I mean, to the point where we're just like straight up lifting storylines out of some of his movies into his comics. But that's really, really fun because it feels like he's taking this idea, he's twisting it into like making it a story within the greater Usagi Yojimbo storyline. And those first 7 volumes are just unbelievably good. I reread the first volume last night because in prep for this hypothetical show we're going to do in the future. And I forgot how easy those comics are to read. Quite honestly, like no other comic. And again, this is published in 1987, right? Like there's this just perfect understanding of like the comic book page and pacing that Sakai gets. And it never stops throughout that whole first 7 volume run. You just feel like everything is building in such a way that feels natural, and he plops in these one-off stories just in time. And again, I don't know if that's from editing from Fantagraphics or whoever, because I don't really know the true order of when these things were published, but at least in the books that you read, that first volume, second volume, perfectly done. There's enough little one-off bits that you're like, oh, this is kind of fun. He's got enough humor in there that I genuinely think you could read this to like an 11-year-old kid and he'd have a fantastic time. And me as a 36-year-old man, I'm just like, no, hell yeah, to all this, right? So yeah, I'm so excited for you to continue on this journey, Zach. And I can't wait to talk more about it because I have clearly a lot of thoughts about this book series. Yeah.
I recently saw a video of Stan Sakai was signing some books or collections, I guess, and doing some sketches on them. And he's paging through the collection. I think it's like a new one or maybe some anniversary or whatever. And he's going through it and he's like, oh, yeah, I remember when I wrote this story. And these are stories from like, I don't know, 20, 30 years ago, maybe.
Yeah.
So like the fact that one creator has had so much control and just like world building and endless stories, like, how many stories can you really tell about a Ronin Rabbit Samurai?
Sure.
But yeah, and Stan Sakai is overall just seems like a great dude. So I love it. I love it. It's not the Eisners if he's not nominated for like lettering or something. Like apparently no one letters better than Stan Sakai. So
I mean, read his comics, dude. I mean, that's the crazy thing is he's still making these books, right? Like there's still Usagi Yojimbo books coming out, and I know that he's gone everywhere, right? Like this rabbit has gone to space, he's gone through time, he's done everything. It feels very much like a Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtle style, like everything is possible character, right? But he always, like, I think that the core books from the earlier things are really, really solid. And I think if you like them in any capacity, my guess is that you'll like anything that he published after as well, because I don't think the tone changes. Like Sakai is a very consistent writer from the stuff that I've checked out that's been a little bit more modern. Everything feels this, it's got the same vibe. And that's like, that's so refreshing, right? To be like, you can jump into pretty much anywhere in this series. One, you'll be able to pick things up probably pretty fast. And two, it just feels like, I don't know, like a breath of fresh air of just like this calm but exciting story all at once. So,
And and something that is really exciting to me to get to read this is that, for my money, indie comics from like the 80s, when indie comics really were indie,
sure.
they hit different. You know what I mean? Like, just like the feel of them is different than what we would consider an independent comic book now, because
Sure.
they were working bare bones in a lot of aspects and just
Yeah.
trying to get stuff published. And I don't know, there's just some kind of tender love and care that era of indie books has that I really appreciate.
Yeah. I think there's the key difference there is the lack of proliferation with the internet, right?
Mhm.
Like a lot of indie comic creators can publish in the same way. They are scraping to make ends meet, and they still want to publish these books, but they have the fortunate situation of being able to distribute it out to people through the internet. Now, that doesn't mean anything in return in terms of success or anything. I think in the same way that way back in the 80s and even 70s, right? Like indie comics were just like word of mouth, hand distribution. You know, you
Mhm.
hope that some newspaper stand would carry your book, or maybe early days of early comic book shops would do the same. But I do agree that there was like a forced, this has to be the absolute fucking best thing someone has ever read, or there is zero chance, right?
Yep.
Back then. Not to say that bad comic books get published today, and that's not my implication here, but I just think that there was a little bit more like scrappiness. I agree to it all. Then again, I mean, but this is why I still go off after weird Kickstarters and stuff, because like you never know, right? Like clearly people are scraping constantly to make their books work, and some of them are fucking bangers. And so
Yeah.
like we should never be overlooking those independent published things, because you never know, right? There's always going to be some really good stuff out there. Anyways, let me get off of my soapbox really quick and talk about a comic book that I read, which is another, or I'm looking forward to reading, which is another Kickstarter book that I just got in the mail. This is The House of Lowther, Volume 2 by Kaylin Smith. Folks have maybe heard me talk about this before, but the story is Sawyer Ellis gets a job at the mysterious rehabilitation center, the House of Lowther, believing it to be an ordinary janitorial position, but soon she realizes the place is not only stuck in the past, but saturated in a world of cryptids. And you've got me. You sold me, right? Like mysterious cryptid asylum, sure. What's that even all about? I'm a complete sucker for this series, and I own the second volume now because the first volume had such a cliffhanger. It was like the end of Saga 54, right? The end of Saga 54. I literally finished. They got turned to the page on the last page of volume 1, and I screamed, "What?" in my house. Like I couldn't believe the direction the book was going, and in such a good way, right? It's very much it's a webtoon comic for anyone out there who's wondering. So you can go read all of it right now. But it's full of like those, tropes of will they, won't they, enemies to lovers, all real exciting webtoon stuff that you can get out of those books. But Kaylin Smith has an art style that is just so perfect. It feels very almost Disney inspired. So there's this like happy, like roundness to everything. But when it gets dark, it gets real dark. And she really knows how to emphasize like story beats and paired with her art in order to like emphasize very impactful moments. The book's very funny. The book's very, it's got a lot of emotional beats. Like I'm super invested in this book, and I'm pretty sure volume 1 only covers like 10 or 12 chapters, something like that. It's something ridiculously short, and I was sucked into that book. I haven't sat down and read a book so fast in a long time, and again, the cliffhanger was massive, and I told myself, I'll just go read it online, and then I never did. And then she announced volume 2, and I was like, my time, I can finally see the end of this. So I mean, I don't think this is the end, but at least I'll get another chunk of chapters that I can read through. And plus it's an absolutely gorgeous book. Let me grab it. It's this beautiful like black book bound in with like gold foil on it. The whole story's in black and white. Oh no, it's in color. No, sorry, it's in color. But like it's a very beautiful looking book. and I'm already seeing spoiler things, so I should stop looking at the interior pages because I have not read this yet. But I'm super excited, and I mean, she just does a fantastic job. I really want to get her on the show to talk about it, if only because I just want to be like, well, what if those two characters were in a room together? What would happen then? And then like, what if like that other person who nobody likes is in the room? Then what happened? You know, I would totally just like fanboy out about it. But yeah, this book is fantastic. If you haven't had a chance to read it, I would really, really recommend The House of Lowther. It's a fantastic book, very well paced. It's just fantastic. Just a smart, beautiful looking comic book altogether. So highly recommended. I'm telling you, indie comics. This is what I'm talking. Indie fucking comics, guys.
Heck yeah. Especially like something like Webtoons, where you can go and read an entire series for free, basically. You know, and there's good stuff over there. I just recently learned of Webtoons maybe last year, and man, like there's some really, really good stuff on there. If you just go and check it out, you'll find something that is up your alley.
Absolutely. Totally agree with that. Well, Danny, what's on top of your pile this week?
On the top of my pile, and before I get into that one real quick, my contractually obligated shout out. Batman 157 is the end of Chip Zdarsky and Jorge Jimenez's run on Batman right before they launch into Hush 2. So make sure to go pick that up. Yeah, no. It's Hush 2. More Hush. But yeah, make sure to go check that out. I really enjoyed Zdarsky's run. But on the top of my pile, it is Star Wars Legacy of Vader #1. This is written by Charles Soule with art by Luke Ross, colors by Nolan Woodard, and letters by Joe Caramagna. In this book, Darth Vader's shadow extends into the rise of the First Order. If you guys remember those movies, I don't know if you guys have seen those movies.
Yeah.
I heard about them.
Yeah.
The reign of Supreme Leader Kylo Ren begins. Kylo's obsession leads him to Mustafar. What secrets does Vader's fortress hold for the young tyrant? So this week we got the new Legacy book, which is like 10 years of Marvel Star Wars is insane to me. Like I remember when like they announced the first Jason Aaron Star Wars book, and I was like, oh, cool. And then Kieran Gillen started doing a Darth Vader series, right? And then he created Dr. Aphra.
Yeah.
And now it's been 10 years since all that. And for a long time, these comics have felt, if you fall behind, you just gotta either try to catch up or wait till the next reset, because they keep doing stuff in between the movies, right? So like, this is it. If you fell behind for 10 years or 5 years or however long, it is your time to jump back into it. So I wanna read a Star Wars book again, because I just kind of stopped reading them all because there was so much stuff going on. But also, like, this is Charles Soule writing Kylo Ren, and I think those are the ones that I always check out. I don't know if there's a more prolific Star Wars writer than Charles Soule. Maybe Kevin Scott.
Yeah, right.
I don't know. They do a lot, especially because he's doing High Republic stuff as well, and the books over at the Dark Horse High Republic stuff, and yeah, there's a lot. But I'm excited. I like Kylo Ren. You know,
Same.
He's just he's a very interesting character, and his obsession with Darth Vader, I think it's both really funny and very interesting. So I want to get in there. So I'm ready to get the Star Wars series again in my pull list.
Hey man, I didn't realize that this is a story about Kylo Ren. I may be freaking reading this book. I mean, I feel you right there. Kylo Ren is a very interesting character. I'm very curious to see what little bits of things they can fill into this story, because quite honestly, this is the problem with Star Wars comics, is that they're trying to fill every single minute with a comic book. Between every instance of like quote unquote canon, right, as defined by the films. Nonetheless, I find Kylo Ren's story to be very interesting, so I'd be curious to check this book out, which like frustrates me to no end, but you know, I love this character, so I must endure.
More.
And Charles Soule is one of those guys that I trust just vehemently. Like I trust him as an author, and him getting a hold of Kylo Ren and focusing in is going to be super interesting.
Totally.
And it's so wild, like the range Soule has as a writer. Like, is he doing the Lucky Devils book, which is completely different in his own thing, and then you have fun. But it can also jump into Star Wars and superhero stuff and all that. So it's great.
I mean, I think I've been saying this since we started this podcast. Charles Soule has always been impressive to me in terms of all of the freaking plates he's spinning, right? Like, even I remember back in the day, there was a moment where he was working on like 8 books, like as a writer, which is bonkers to me. Like, I know that there are writers out there who are doing many books, but like 8? Like 8 concurrent books? Are you freaking crazy? Like, that's bonkers to me. So
he's
I
doing
never
comics and prose novels, and he's all over the place.
Yeah. At one point, I think he was involved in some of the High Republic, like, production stuff that they were doing, like TV shows and movies or whatever they're going to be doing. So, yeah, like, crazy.
And he's a lawyer. I don't know how much law so he does, but he's a lawyer. Like,
yeah.
That'd be funny. Yeah. Like, yeah, all these comics are just his side gig, right? Like,
yeah.
This is his hobby.
Jeez, yeah, that's something. Maybe we'll have to get him on the show and bug him about it. But I think that does it for today for us. I don't know if there's anything else you guys want to rant and rave about, but I think that wraps up comics for us. Next week's show is going to be pretty fun. I think we're going to do another one of these episodes. It's going to be me, Nick, and Paul. We're going to be talking some fun stuff. I'm very excited. If only just more comics. See what Nick's up to. See what Paul's up to. And you're going to hear more about the zine. I mean, we recently got confirmation Meredith McLaren's going to be in the book. So I don't know if you got this far in the episode. Black Cloak artist is going to be in this. Also the artist of It's All Greek. So that's really exciting. Plus a bunch of other names. I think we have 20 artists total going into this thing. So make sure to go check out ircb.fyi/zine. I want to say thank you to Nick for recording with us today, being our proof listener. Thanks to Zach and Danny for their time. Thank you to everyone listening live. You are fantastic human beings, and we appreciate your time as always. So thanks to Zander for editing our show. And until next time, comics are good, and so are you.